As is typical when a new line of graphics cards gets released, there's this immediate focus on high end, with Nvidia pushing cards like the 1080 and 1070 as having unparalleled performance, while AMD's RX 480 was supposed to be a VR for the masses type product. But what about the humble gamer without a bottomless trust fund bank account who just wants a solid 1080p experience? Let's have a look at Nvidia's latest offering for the blue-collar members of the PC Master Race, the GeForce GTX 1050 Ti. Massdrop is currently featuring the Infinity ErgoDock Split Keyboard Kit. Check it out in the video description. So the GTX 1050 Ti is based off the same Pascal microarchitecture as the rest of the GeForce 10 series, but it uses the new GP107 GPU. This is a bit of a change from the GeForce 9 series, where the GTX 950 just ran a cut-down version of the GTX 960's GPU. With the 1050 Ti, you get 768 CUDA cores with a 1392 MHz on the boost clock, as well as 4 GB of GDDR5 VRAM running on a 128-bit memory bus. Although these cards aren't compatible with SLI, you do get other GeForce 10 standard features like NVIDIA Ansel for cool screenshots, as well as support for DirectX 12 and Vulkan. For our benchmarks, we got two flavors of the card, the Zotac GTX 1050 Ti Mini and the MSI GTX 1050 Ti OC. Both feature a modest factory overclock, with the Zotac running at 1417 MHz on the boost clock and the MSI running just a bit higher at 1455. Both of these cards are small form factor and don't require any power beyond what the motherboard's PCIe slot can provide. In fact, in our Crysis 3 load test, our system drew less than 160 watts from the wall in entirety, while staying below about 60-ish degrees Celsius. Very interesting numbers if you're fighting size, power, or thermal limits in your current system. Or are they? To give a real answer, we of course need to look at performance in real games. So here's how our 1050 Ti stacked up on our Core i7-6850K test bench that we use for all of our testing to standardize our results and eliminate bottlenecks. All tests were performed at 1080p, as this is a less powerful card that isn't really aimed at users going for 1440p or 4K. Starting out with the aforementioned Crysis 3, which is still a punishing title after over 3.5 years, the 1050 Ti performed quite well for a card targeted squarely at the lower middle end of the market. It managed frame rates in the low 40s on very high presets, while bumping things down to high delivers a buttery smooth experience at 71 frames per second. Moving on to Rise of the Tomb Raider, the story was somewhat similar, with the 1050 Ti managing close to 60 FPS on high settings, while very high will set you back about 10 frames. DirectX 12 unfortunately didn't help matters, costing us a few FPS actually, which has been a recurring theme on the latest NVIDIA set of hardware. The much anticipated Battlefield 1 played very nicely with both of our 1050 Ti's, scoring in the low 60s on ultra settings. Performance on the highest preset in Doom was similarly impressive, with frame rates in the upper 60s. But although these numbers are quite good for a budget-oriented 1080p focused card, does that necessarily mean the card is a good value? Well, that depends on how you define value. If you go for strict dollars per frame analysis, the GTX 1050 Ti doesn't exactly come out looking that good, as you can see on this graph. However, many buyers looking for a graphics card in this price range mostly care about just smooth 1080p performance at respectable settings without any donking around. And right now, the $140 GTX 1050 Ti is the cheapest card that hits all these marks, as it scored very close to or above 60 FPS at high settings in all of our games, and scored at least in the mid-40s or even higher at the max presets. Right now, its closest competitor on the red team, the $100 RX 460, can't really say the same. But then $40 is a pretty big price delta at this end of the market. However, given that the next step up performance-wise is the RX 470 at $50 more, it seems like the 1050 Ti has a nice little spot carved out for it, for the folks that just want to come as close as possible to maxing out titles in 1080p for the least amount of money. assuming that the actual prices line up with MSRP at all, as I discussed in detail in this video. So if you are in the market for a more budget-oriented card, it doesn't do for PC gaming what, like Doritos Locos Tacos did for the simulated Mexican food market, but it'll do. Thanks for watching, guys. If this video sucked, you know what to do, but if it was awesome and you're like, whoa, more cheap graphics cards, yeah! Hit the like button, get subscribed, all that awesome stuff. Check out the links in the video description down below where you can buy stuff like these graphics cards or these cool shirts, or talk about things on the forum like how we're NVIDIA shills, or like how we're AMD shills, or like how we're Intel shills, or like how we're insert other brand here shills. Either of those would probably work. If you want to see another video, check out this one, which is on the RX 470. Let's do that, and I'll see you next time.
It's only been a few months since the launch of the GTX 1060, which was designed to compete against AMD's RX 480, but soon after the more affordable sub $200 Pocket was occupied with AMD's RX 460 and 470, this was actually a very important price segment for mass market gamers, and at the time Nvidia lacked anything that could compete since the GTX 950 used the previous generation Maxwell architecture. So the green response is here with the GTX 1050 and 1050 Ti priced at $110 and $140 respectively. In this video, we will primarily focus our attention on the custom overclocked 1050 Ti from Gigabyte, the G1 Gaming 4G. You can find how the less expensive GTX 1050 performs in comparison on our website. Full performance analysis is linked in the description.
It's super compact with a lot of potential. The ASRock Desk Mini lets you populate your own 6th or 7th gen CPUs. There are 2 M.2 slots for storage and network accessories and 2 SSD mounts inside the crazy small 5-inch chassis. Building a tiny PC just got super affordable with ASRock.
So this price point of $140 for the Ti version slots perfectly well between the $100 RX 460 and $170 RX 470, filling in the price gap that was previously occupied by the 750 Ti. We will see no Founders Edition of this card, so users can pick their flavor of a custom card. However, the Gigabyte card I have here costs $30 more than the reference pricing, placing it right against the RX 470, which isn't good news at all. In terms of upgrading, the GTX 1050 Ti is supposed to offer a great path for people still using GTX 750 Ti and GTX 650 Ti cards. Meanwhile, users upgrading from the GTX 950 will see an FPS boost, especially at DX12, but don't expect the quantum leaps forward like previous Pascal cards. Remember, when it launched the GTX 950, that was about 15% more than the GTX 1050 Ti. Interestingly, the GTX 1050 Ti actually costs less than the 750 Ti did when it launched. The 1050 Ti shares the same number of CUDA cores, texture units, ROPs, and memory bus as the GTX 950, while having a lower TDP of 75 watts with 4 GB of GDDR5 memory. The real differentiating factor is evident in clock speeds, since NVIDIA's new GP107 core is able to reach higher frequencies while still maintaining very low power consumption numbers. Now, some of these cards are really focused on a plug-and-play mentality for upgrading existing systems, since they don't require a 6-pin auxiliary power connector, since the motherboard slot supplies all the power. However, in this case, our pre-overclocked G1 and other higher clocks at 1050 Ti's, a 6-pin connector is required, and that grants plenty of headroom for overclocking. One thing to note is that the cards without additional power connector won't be able to overclock all that much, since NVIDIA's GeForce Boost strives to maximize clock speeds with a given 75 watts. Our Gigabyte 1050 Ti comes with 2 performance modes. The gaming mode clocks the base and boost frequencies 6% higher than reference clocks, while the overclock mode boosts frequencies above 2 extra percent versus the game mode. This is possible thanks to the extra power provided by the 6-pin, otherwise the reference design cards are strictly limited to factory boost clocks. Physically, this card shares some characteristics with the bigger G1 GTX 1080. The plastic construction on the shroud feels less high-end, and the orange accents give the card some character. The WindForce 2X cooling has dual 80mm fans with unique blades, which are also found on the G1 1080. This enhances the airflow by 23% over traditional fans, plus their fan stop feature turns off the fans below a certain core temperature. The use of custom components on the PCB like efficient MOSFETs and solid capacitors should help boost system performance and durability of this card in the long run, especially once the overclocking mode is engaged. The backplate is clean and simple. It comes with brushed aluminum finish, but I also wanted to point out the size of this card. Compared to offerings from EVGA, ASUS, MSI, etc., the G1 1050 Ti is a bit longer at just under 9 inches, but still on the safe side of upgrading older systems with smaller cases. The I/O consists of single dual-link DVI port, 3 HDMI 2.0 ports, and a single DisplayPort 1.4 connector. RGB has made its way into this card with just the logo and the fan stop sign lit. Customization is done through the Extreme Engine utility app, giving us 6 different effects with brightness control. This is also where you'll select the performance mode with a user-friendly overclocking tab with no hidden settings or switches. Plus you can play around with voltage curves and fan speeds, which is a nice touch. So let's begin with the benchmarks. The G1 frame rate UC was achieved from the overclock performance mode, gaining us between 5 to 8% higher frame rates than the reference version, and that was consistent throughout the titles at 1080p at the highest settings. As expected, it performed right in between the RX 460 and 470 with a significant improvement compared to older GTX 950 and 750 Ti. Now, that was for DX11 titles. We've since expanded our DX12 testing suite and added a bit of Vulkan testing as well. As you can see, even our overclocked GTX 1050 Ti can keep up with the RX 470. This has been a long time concern for us because it seems the large frame rate advantages Pascal card enjoys so much in DX11 don't translate into DX12. Will this continue as time goes on? We'll make sure to look at this as more games using Microsoft's new API are released. What's fascinating is how efficient the 1050 Ti is, outperforming the RX 460 by a good margin while consuming less power. That's important for people looking to upgrade older systems since they won't have to upgrade their PSUs. Gigabyte mentions a lot about their custom cooling being extremely quiet, so let's have a listen. Honestly, it was pretty much inaudible over the noise from my case fans, and even without additional fans running, I'm not sure I would have heard it. As for temperatures, the G1 Gaming ran extremely cool and didn't surpass 65 degrees Celsius during our testing even